What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here with the results of patch 11.18. This is a shirt I think you've seen me wear several times because we do laundry reasonably frequently, and I usually wear whatever's on top. So the frequency with this shirt is the frequency you see us do laundry. Okay, anyway, 11.18 came out. This is the first of two Worlds Focused patches, meaning that 11.18 has a bunch of changes aimed at pro play, and 11.19, which is the Worlds patch, will have even more changes aimed at pro play. So for example, looking at champions that the win rate didn't go down by as much as they expected, like if they thought, a 1.25% Varus win rate nerf would put him at the right presence for pro, and he only went down by 0.5, then they'd be like, okay, well, let's hit him again about that hard, and now we get him there. Or just finding more champions they, didn't scoop up in the first patch and going on from that. So, pro-focused patch. There are some changes that are not pro-focused, though. I want to shout out once again what I find to be the best public stats website for League of Legends, which is lolalytics.com. There's just, put a .com down there. That's the website. They're really outstanding. There's some really cool stuff out there. Of course, you can already see the spreadsheet on the screen for a lot of the data we're looking at, but 11.18 did have several changes, although it felt like slightly fewer than 11.17 in the fact that I was able to delete some rows from my spreadsheet, and when all was said and done. That said, we did some investigations that were interesting. So first things first, Gangplank, after getting grasp taken away from him, was obviously in a very, very bad spot, and so he got pretty simple health changes, getting a bunch more HP and HP per level, and he ended up in a spot that's about where he was before, right? 46 and change is not completely terrible, but obviously not great. Yeah, okay, he gained like 2.8% win rate. That's great. One thing I want to point out, by the way, is that, as I mentioned in the previous patch rundown, I frequently have human errors. I had someone inform me, actually twice, but I only caught it the second time, that I was doing my confidence interval math incorrectly. I was taking it from someone else who suggested it from Reddit. They had done it wrong. I copied their work and didn't think about it. Never copy homework, kids. Do it yourself. But I was doubling the size of the confidence interval. If you want 2 standard deviations, you're just doing 1 over square root n, not 2 over square root n. Because the baseline for the variance just works out that way. Essentially, trust me. And so our confidence intervals are much smaller. They were supposed to be much smaller in the previous one as well, but here we are. So we can basically just be much more confident in our findings because we did statistics correctly this time around. Like I said, human error definitely happens. I am not immune to that, so always, grain of salt when people make mistakes. So let's talk about Gangplank. He is not doing terribly, terribly well. 46.2% win rate. That's obviously not great. Yes, the buffs are pretty big. With 100,000 games, we're pretty confident in the results. That he's still, a 46% win rate champion. That's all great. We can look at this whole row and we're like, yeah. By the way, real quick, just in case it's not obvious, obviously this is the new win rate on the patch. This is how much the win rate changed by. It's the exact same numbers you can see over here. This is the number of games we're measuring, and so these are just basically copy pasted from the website. This is the size of our 95% confidence interval, so plus or minus 0.3% win rate. We are 95% confident that if we were to keep playing games on this patch with the same level of skill and the same builds and the same champions, you're going to keep seeing a win rate between these two numbers, or within 0.3% of the number we're seeing. And that says, well, if it really is outside those bounds though, or right at the very edges of those bounds, then what are we looking at? And yeah, we're looking at him being between a 45.9 and 46.5% win rate. If we're doing it in terms of measuring, hey, what is the change in win rate? Yeah, we're still pretty sure that the buff itself is +2 to, +2.5 to +3. But we're also pretty confident that the actual resting win rate of this champion is probably here unless something changes, like people get better at builds. Speaking of, I did that as well. Now we're not gonna tab through like in the previous one because I went and already looked at it myself. But basically, as far as I can tell, Essence Reaver is the more popular and substantially worse build. So I once again saw some idiocy on Reddit today. I wasn't reading a lot of the League subreddit recently, but I saw some today talking about how Gangplank is back to being a champion where you just hope you get lucky, and if you get lucky, you delete the enemy team. And it's like, well, if you look at his builds, you actually don't go well. People go Essence Reaver, but they should not go Essence Reaver. The win rate difference for Trinity Force over Essence Reaver is really, really, really large. And with enough games that, look, these win rates are not changing by that much. They're changing by 0.5%, right? Gangplank is popular enough, and he's going for these items. And by the way, this is not this is just what is the win rate if you finish this item first. Now, of course, Essence Reavers are obviously often finished much sooner. Trinity Forces are finished much later. So in a game where you're getting completely stomped and you're surrendering at 15 and it's completely GG and it's unwinnable, well, if Essence Reaver tends to be done at 12 minutes, even a badly performing Gangplank can finish an Essence Reaver by 14:30 or something. Whereas a Triforce tends to be at about 14 minutes, which means in a game where you're gonna instant surrender and you got completely stomped and you couldn't win lane and no one else won lane and you surrendered, well, you didn't finish Triforce in time because you were on pace for a 60-minute Trinity Force. So there is a small bias there. My expert opinion is that bias is not strong enough to make us reject the findings that we have. If we were to magically play out the games and know what the build were going to be, you would not see the win rates change by very much. Ultimately, I am pretty confident in these findings. Trinity Force Gangplank is a substantially stronger build than Essence Reaver first Gangplank. Your Sheen item should be a Trinity Force. The damage is much, much higher. Go for that. And if you do go Trinity Force Gangplank, because again, let's be clear, the proportion of games that are 15-minute surrenders is very, 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 very small. So you are not moving this win rate much by excluding 15-minute surrenders and having that change builds around, because that is a very small fraction of the games overall. Just really want to be clear about that one, that it's not going to change these numbers much. So we can be really, really confident that, look, the actual win rate of Trinity Force Gangplank is between 48 and 49%. I'm really confident that's true. And let's be clear, like a 48 to 49% win rate champion, there are a lot of those. And people don't consider those champions trash. Like Varus is one of those, and Varus is played a ton. Triforce Gangplank is solid. Now, I'm not saying he's great. Like, there's not this magic second item that's like a 54% win rate that just no one's getting. That's not there. He's clearly not, gonna be a stomper. People are getting off of Stridebreaker, by the way. That's correct here as well. But people are clearly building, twice as many Essence Reavers Trinity Forces, and they are wrong. Be the change you want to see in the world. Go Trinity Force Gangplank. That is the build you want to see. It's the build that makes sense on him. Go for it. Next up is Soraka, who got very, very, very large buffs, and she's slated for nerfs in the next patch. Yeah, she's doing really, really, really well. Absolutely should be nerfed. 54 and change win rate. Again, we're really confident that the Grievous Wounds on ult was like a 2-ish% win rate buff. We're really confident she's a 54% win rate or so champion. Yeah, really OP, really, really worth playing. If you want to get some free low, go for it. The ban rate obviously has more than tripled from sub 1% to 3 and change. So, almost 4x, and for good reason. As long as her pick rate is reasonably high, and hey, 200,000 games is reasonably high. Yeah, Soraka should be in a lot of games. She's very, very strong. You should play her. You're going to win games on her. Next up is Miss Fortune, who got a substantial buff as well. She got basically 2 extra waves on her ultimate across each rank, which is more of an early game buff than a late game buff. She's another champion who is now in a quite good spot. Will say, I talked about this in the previous patch rundown as well. In general, the way Lawlegs does data, their gold plus win rates actually have some inflation to them. So we're looking at I think 50.4% is the average win rate. So there is some deflation you've got to kind of keep in the back of your mind. It's not a huge factor. We'll talk about the fact that Miss Fortune is still very strong overall, but it was worth noting that Miss Fortune, the other pirate captain, bounty hunter, whatever, is she was very slightly strong pre-patch. She is, for most players, and by the way, I want to point out, I'm measuring gold plus solo queue across this patch, so roughly the top third of players, which gives me a pretty solid level of skill, but also a lot of games to be really sure of the findings. Gold is not the same as Challenger. Look, if that's, the elo you play, it's not going to look very similar, but this is going to hold true for the vast majority of players. It's going to be a pretty accurate set of data. All right, but yeah, Miss Fortune was a reasonable champion before, a reasonably fairly strong champion before. She is now quite good. Another champion that's worth playing, not as auto win as Soraka, of course, and in fact 54 is still not an auto win. It's just well, you're slightly strong. I mean, you're very, very strong, but you're still going 54 to 46. You're only going +8 across 100 games. That's not absurd. It's clearly very good, but this is not ridiculous, right? Plus or minus 3% is hey, they're gonna feel overbearing, but again, it's +6 over 100 games. But yeah, definitely doing pretty well. Good champion. Then we have Singed, and Singed got a pretty big buff here as well. Worth noting that the tooltip or the patch note wording was incorrect. The Grievous Wounds is only on the Poison Trail. That said, still a very big buff. Singed went from an overall balanced champion to an overall powerful champion. This is with his win rate going up a bit. His pick rate only went up by a little bit. We have some champions like Talia whose pick rate tripled or quadrupled. Singed only went up by a little bit. Went from 175 to 25. So 30ish, 40, not 40, but 30ish percent, 30-something percent more pick rate. Changes in pick rate, I think, can often indicate inexperienced players playing the champion. Not always, as Singed is a champion that doesn't really appeal to a lot of players. The buff didn't look that extreme on paper. No one's like, oh, you know, I really hate Singed, but now he has Grievous. Time to be a Singed one trick. Like that kind of stuff's not going to happen. You know, same thing's going to be kind of true with someone like Riven, where it's like you really just have Riven main spell that champion. Generally, unpopular champions don't tend to get like. Salience is one of those kinds of champions where it's like just Singed mains kind of play him sort of thing a little bit. So that's kind of where we are. So yeah, this is a pretty solid buff. I don't think it's getting deflated too much by behavioral changes like bad Singes are playing the champion. This is just, hey, Singe is actually pretty strong and looks pretty good. So now we get to Taliyah. So Taliyah jungle gained a lot more than I thought she would. Obviously, she's doing pretty nicely, plus 1.2%. We look at the data. It's like, well, we had almost 50,000 Taliyah jungle games. We're really confident that yeah, she gained about 1% win rate. Between 0.7 and 1.6% win rate gained here. She's in a solid spot. Now she's not overbearing. I wouldn't call her really overpowered, but her resting win rate is somewhere between 50.3, 51.3. She is slightly strong as a jungler, and that's fine. Taliyah is a totally reasonable champion. Taliyah jungle landed in a pretty good spot. Now, I still want to maintain that I think this buff means more for lower elo and higher elo, but the problem is you're going to have really hard time measuring that when it's like, well, in Gold Plus, we have almost 50,000 games. If we cut off Gold, we're at 20,000 games. We cut off Plat, we're at 3,000 games, and it's like, well, we can't measure, right? Like now we can't measure a difference anymore. Like there's going to be too much variance, so we can't do it until we get more and more and more and more data. We can't be confident that it really is an elo skewed buff, so that one's not going to happen. But then we can look at Taliyah mid, and as I scroll over here, I just wanted to here is our pick rate data real quick. So this is the pick rate of Taliyah jungle after and before the patch. So it went from 0.72% pick rate, so 0.72% of all champions were Taliyah jungle, to 2% of all champions were Taliyah jungle, which is 2.9 times the pick rate, right? So her pick rate tripled. Taliyah jungle tripled her pick rate. The number of games per day tripled. That can be an influx of bad Taliyah players, absolutely. But the win rate still went up from what I consider to be actually a pretty small buff with the worked ground. Ended up being a pretty big deal. Now, this could also be, actually, there's a bunch of good Taliyah jungle players who came back because of the buffs. That is theoretically possible. I doubt that, but it is theoretically possible. I don't think there were any really big jungle metagame changes that should have buffed Taliyah. Like, I don't think the landscape of champions changed so much that Taliyah was magically a better jungler. It's possible that it was true as well. That can always be the something that changes with any given patch, but I think it's unlikely. But the really big one is Taliyah mid. Taliyah went from a 0.12% pick rate to a 0.6% pick rate, which is a 5 times pick multiplier. So an even larger influx of new Taliyah players. Her pick rate in mid went 5x. And for whatever reason, in my opinion, that feels more like bad Taliyahs coming in than in jungle Taliyah. I don't know why I feel that way, but I feel that way. Maybe I shouldn't, but I don't know what I'm basing it off of, but that is my opinion. Either way, despite the fact that the patch had strictly buffs in it, because worked ground doesn't last as long, worked ground is smaller. I mean, unless you really, really, really wanted to spam worked ground queues, which you can still do by just going back to that pocket of area, this feels like bad Taliyah players are losing games. But it's worth noting that, okay, sure, the sample of data is going to be pretty small. Keep in mind that we're, what, 4 days into the patch? Right, so we're 4 days into the patch of what, would be a 14-day patch. So we have, 1/3 the data. But we have 5 times the number of mid games per day than before. So, we didn't have 14,000 Taliyah games last patch. And again, our variance is plus or minus 0.8. So, like, there was a world where, like, we're kind of overlapping variance. We're kind of overlapping the standard deviations and the confidence intervals here. I mean, that's its own kind of thing. Like, comparing bell curves is not really the right way to go about this. You want to do like a whole p-value test and stuff, and I just don't want to get into that really at all. But anyway, I'm going to say that, look, Taliyah's win rate is going to fluctuate in general quite a bit, to the tune of about 1% patch over patch, just from her pick rate being low and being susceptible to random chance for mid. Like, that is just going to be somewhat true at this champion. Now, it could have gone the other way. This could have been a 2.5% win rate for the champion, because actually she was at a low point pre-patch and we're at the high end of this one. And yeah, actually somehow the worked ground changes were a nerf to Taliyah. I mean, it's theoretically possible, right? Or that there was a bug that was a nerf to Taliyah, or who knows what. But I'm chalking up the behavioral changes. I still think they were strict buffs. But yes, patch for patch, Taliyah's performing weaker because, in my opinion, worse players are playing Taliyah. worst Taliyah players are playing Taliyah. Next up, Twitch got a pretty simple 10 AD on his ultimate. Pretty simple there. You can see down there his overall pick rate went up 1.8% over on the low lick side, like down here. So, you know, from 4 and change to 5 and change. So, you know, 25% uptick in players, 25% more Twitch players. But worth noting, 10 AD on an ultimate was worth a 1% win rate, like pretty much flat on, right? That's kind of worth knowing. Twitch, really popular champion, 133,000 plays. Like the variance going to be, the standard deviation going to be pretty low. So our confidence interval is yeah, Twitch is a reasonably strong champion. He was okay-ish. Now I would consider him good, and Twitch is worth playing. Good to know. Next up, Karma support. Got some small changes. Double checking what they were real quick, as I've got the patch notes up off camera. Yeah, 2 armor and 10 points on the shield. Karma support gained 0.5% win rate, that even though she's not incredibly popular, we're still really confident the win rate went up. Of course, they were strict buffs. Keep in mind, her pick rate didn't even go up by that much, right? She went from, you know, 5 and change to 6 and change percent, not a ton. So, you know, it's not like people were dying to play Karma support. 2 armor and 10 shielding is not going to make, you know, people jump over themselves to go play the champion. So it's not like she's getting an influx of bad players. Ultimately, look, Karma support is not that great, right? She is a 48 and change percent win rate champion. Not trash, not garbage, but like not great. Like you just should just play Soraka or something. You know, play a real champion who actually wins a bunch more games. But, you know, Karma's okay-ish. Looked at Karma top real quick. Obviously not incredibly popular, but we can kind of still drill down with almost 9,000 games played. And we're like, yeah, you know, again, you know, at the edges of these confidence intervals, Karma support and Karma top are in kind of the same boat. But just speaking for solo queue, obviously Karma support is where people play the champion. But, you know, realistically playable, right? Decent champion for top lane. 10 flat shield and 2 armor turns out works pretty well for top lane. The buff means less for mid. And again, we're reasonably confident. Like, okay, we're pretty sure, you know, her gaining 2 armor and stuff is not a nerf for mid lane. But again, these confidence intervals overlap, right? It could be, you know, at the edge, 1.7 up for mid, and at the other edge, you know, 0.6 up for bot, or sorry, for top. You know, these are... again, there's variance here, so you can't say for sure, but yeah, it you know, feels like it's likely Karma top got buffed by more, and you know, it's reasonable that Karma top is probably a actually solid champion to maybe slightly strong, which would make sense be the fact that, like, hey, flat armor is probably a bit more of a top lane focused buff because, you know, it makes sense there. So still though, obviously Karma support appears to be the weakest of her roles. She's a solid 48% over there, whereas top and mid are pretty reliably 49 plus, or even, you know, 48 and change plus. But, you know, we're generally pretty confident that, at least for solo queue, Karma is a stronger solo laner than she is support. We've seen her flexed around in pro play as well, so we may still see that happen. But this is still some of the highest win rates I've seen for Karma without her being a pro dominant pick. So at least Riot's done a good job of kind of pushing her towards being playable in solo queue, because she hasn't been before. Next up, we have Jinx changes. Scrolling down to see this one. Jinx got cheaper rockets very early on in the game. Obviously not a very big buff, but we have enough games, because Jinx is very popular, that we're still confident it moved the needle. Now, again, this can be the metagame change around her a little bit. There can be other, you know, other factors that came in and changed the stuff around, because obviously keep in mind, you know, we might have had other champions get nerfed. You know, Varus got nerfed, Ashe got nerfed. They're both pretty popular. At the same time, you know, we saw champions get buffed like Twitch. We saw champions get buffed that she can fight against. So, you know, Kog'Maw got slightly stronger, which can matter if, you know, they just splash a little bit of AP on a correct build. But again, the changes are pretty small, so you can start to say, well, maybe some of this is actually just from the environment changing around her to the tune of, you know, 0.5%. But Jinx is performing okay, right? She's fine. If you want to play Jinx, go for it. She seems okay. Next up is Zoe. Zoe didn't actually get that much from a pretty small cooldown buff to her E. Ultimately, still overall weak for solo queue. Best we can say. We obviously know it's a buff. It's a strict cooldown buff to her E. But yeah, not in that great of a spot. Next up is Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa gained some solid cooldown reduction on her E. Once again, incredibly popular champion. So despite the win rate being plus 0.2%, we're actually still, yeah, you know, we're really confident this is just, it's just a very small buff to the tune of 0.3%. Again, could be metagame changes. Could be that, you know, because Jinx got buffed, because Twitch got buffed, because Misfortune got buffed, that we actually have a downward pressure on AD carry win rate. Because the buffs are bigger than the nerfs and the pick rates are going that way and whatever. Like, people are getting off of low pick rate. Sorry, people are getting off of low win rate champions like Varus and Aphelios and onto high win rate champions like Misfortune. Well, okay, those do different things. Like, You're getting off of you're getting off of low win rate and onto high win rate. You're having a downward pressure on win rate overall. That would be true. So there's a chance again that the metagame around this is changing. Kaisa, I know I'm saying the opposite will happen with Jinx, right? But like again, these are just things that can happen, right? The environment can change around them. I didn't go and do an analysis on like, are people playing stronger AD carries now? Like, where are the pick rates versus the win rates in these champions? I didn't do that. So like, I'm just saying, hey, this could be true. This other thing could be true. The opposite could be true. I don't know. I'm just saying, hey, right? These are the kinds of things that happen patch over patch that make this sometimes hard to measure. Urgot got, I don't remember. Oh yeah, he got cooldown and mana cost off his Q. This did barely anything. Again, Urgot much less popular. So hey, it could have been up to 0.4%. It could have been a nerf if like people are, doing the wrong things onto him. Look at his pick rate data. It changed a little bit to the tune of 15% more play. Like, maybe we are inviting some weak Urgot players into the champion, but by and large, Urgot he's all right. Seems to be fine. 1 second. All right, and we're back. I just froze this top bar so that when we scroll down, we still have it. Where were we? Yes, we were on Kaisa Urgot. Okay, so then we got Yuumi buffs. Yuumi also got a very, very small cooldown change to her early game E. Once again, we're quite confident this buff is not very, very big. Worth noting, Yuumi has tended to be a late game champion. Early game shield cooldown buffs does not seem to do very much to the champ, so whatever. She's an okay champ. Seems to be fine. Obviously, we know she got strictly buffed with shorter cooldowns, but obviously not an outstanding champion. Yone, another one who got very, very little gained. Not a very big deal for him. Not a problem. Next up is Mundo Top. Win rate technically went down. That said, we are well within standard deviations. So generally speaking, as far as I can tell, the R got strictly better. One thing I got wrong from the patch rundown, although to be fair, the patch note was listed incorrectly. The bonus health gained through Mundo Ultimate is coded to be increased base health, meaning it does not affect the damage output of things like his W and E, which are coded to only respect the amount of bonus health you have bought. They do not scale with champion level. They only scale with health bought. And the ulti giving you health instead of, healing to cut through Grievous does not give you the kind of health that makes your damage higher. So, okay, he functions a bit better around Grievous wounds, and indeed is a kind of flat champion. We look at both these, and through top and jungle, even though the data seems to indicate, okay, Mundo top got nerfed, Mundo jungle got buffed. Okay, why? It's like, well, the ultimate is arguably better in the early rank, so maybe late game ult is worse, and maybe that's a reasonable argument. But again, the confidence intervals here pretty heavily overlap. They both go to -0.3, they both go to +0.3, and even beyond. There is a decent chance that Mundo jungle, in fact, did gain more than Mundo top did. There's evidence to support that, but it's not really strongly supported statistically. Just it's more likely than not that it's true. Then we go on to Zed. Sorry, I just realized I wasn't scrolling down past these very much. My apologies for that one. Zed mid, not a lot changed about him from what I recall. I'm gonna scroll down and check real quick, but I don't believe much happened to him as a laner. Indeed, no. The only thing that changed about Zed was his damage to monsters. It is still capped against epic monsters, but that said, I can't think of an epic monster where you're hitting the cap anyway, so his ability to help with Dragon or help with Baron or Rift Herald didn't really change. But hey, if you're helping, steal a blue buff or do whatever else, technically wouldn't matter there. But we are basically at some degree of variance. Keep in mind, there were lethality item changes. There were buffs to Predator, which doesn't matter, but a buff to the ward breaking item, which shouldn't change much about Zed either, but maybe he's buying it and it's wrong. Who knows? It's a possibility, I suppose. But again, we can see our 95% confidence interval simply overlaps with 0%. Or, the world shifted around him a little bit, but obviously not surprised to see very little happen about Zed. That said, Zed jungle did gain win rate, obviously, right? Zed jungle got strictly buffed, and even though his clear is very, very fast, his clear is very unhealthy. So I think you have to optimize the Zed jungle clear for it to actually work well. Again, it is very, 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 very fast, but what does Zed jungle do but walk at you and deal damage? At that point, why don't you just play Graves or something, who's actually a good champion and scales reasonably well and has range damage and has a slow because of his W. Like, yes, Zed can slow with WE, but we are pretty confident with a pretty solid number of games, by the way. Like, Zed jungle shows up this patch and has 5 times the games of Mundo jungle. He almost as many games as Mundo, and he almost as many games in jungle as Mundo overall. Like, let's be clear, Zed is a really, 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 really popular champion. In his secondary role, he has more than all of Kog'Maw almost, and all of Dr. Mundo almost, and almost all of Urgot almost, and all of Zoe almost, and all of Talia almost, right? Like, almost Gangplank, right? Like Zed jungle has 6% the pick rate of Gangplank the champion. Zed is really popular, and it's not because he's overpowered, because he's not. And again, people will probably hop off the train pretty quickly. His pick rate day by day will certainly decrease, but Zed is really, really fun to play. This is just a fact of life. Zed is fun. He is well designed. He's a cool champion. He is a very edgy ninja, and that tends to be pretty cool. That said, Zed jungle does not appear to be very good. Certainly, there's going to be a lot of bad Zed players playing Zed jungle. We can see this win rate go up because of bad Zeds self-selecting out of the champion, whether you know the champion or not. Sometimes just the play style suits you or doesn't suit you. That can be a factor, but generally speaking, I don't tend to see like a follow-up 3% win rate change as players self-select their way into pick and bans. It's just, no, Zed jungle is not that good. And I'm pretty confident in the finding that Zed jungle isn't actually that good, that we're not going to see that huge behavioral shift that changes things around. Next up is Morgana. What's interesting is we're actually pretty confident that her win rate, in fact, went down this patch despite getting strictly buffed in her E cooldown. I don't know if it's possible that people are skilling her incorrectly now as a result, because they don't think they need E ranks anymore, even though they're supposed to max E second. But across a very large number of games, Morgana is a quite popular support, to the tune of almost as much as Zed mid, and her pick rate, like, it barely went up, right? It went up by 0.12%. Like, Morgana has been popular. People like to play Morgana. Morgana is a fun support. Obviously, the binding is cool. The black shield's cool. You know, she is a mainstay of solo queue for sure. It actually just shocks me that Morgana support has almost as many games as just Zed. Like, that's actually shocking to me. Yes, Zed's ban rate is 50%. I realize that. But, like, Morgana's is 30, right? Like, they both get banned a lot. They're both really popular. And they're both also just, like, roughly balanced champions. Like, they're about 50%. People ban them because they're frustrating, but not actually because they're overpowered. Like, by comparison, Soraka's ban rate is nowhere as high as it should be. That champion is dumb busted, and the pick rate is as high, right? Like look at these win rates and pick rates. Right? Like, these pick rate, the number of games played is identical. The win rate difference is 4%, and Morgana's ban rate is, like, absurdly higher. Like, come on, Soraka's ban rate, what is it? 3%? What is it for Morgana? 30%. Come on, you tell me that players are rational? Come on, players aren't rational. Don't tell me that ban rate is power. Don't tell me that. Ban rate is not power. Ban rate is people believe things, and it's not true. Yeah, MMR vaccines, am I right? So, next up is Kog'Maw. So Kog'Maw, in fact, lost win rate in the bottom lane. I think mostly because people are probably trying to build him. Oh, actually, I forgot a minus sign. There we go. Kog'Maw in the bottom lane is still doing pretty well. People are, I think, trying AP Kogbot. AP Kogbot is not good. So you shouldn't be doing it really. It is a weaker build than just building him normally. Just go build, you know, AD Cog. It's good. Just do it. It's great. Then we look at, you know, the important thing is Cog mid. Because again, you know, anything around 5.5%, like, yeah, you know, it could be down 1% from behavior, it could be down 0%. But the thing we're going to look at here is Kog'Maw in the mid lane. So Kog'Maw in the mid lane gained 0.9% win rate. Looks like we're not getting the coloring here, but it doesn't really matter. You can look at what numbers are. Yeah, gained 0.9% win rate, and now is a 50.7% win rate overall in mid lane. So mid Kog'Maw he went from slightly weak to viable. Like, Kog'Maw went from slightly weak to slightly strong off of a very aggressive E-AP ratio buff. I am surprised that an aggressive E-AP ratio buff is only about 1%. Now, that said, his mid lane pick rate, I assume, skyrocketed. I didn't actually look at the pick rate differences before and after, because it only shows you the mid lane win rate before and after. It doesn't really matter. I don't think at 5x like Lillia, but either way, we're pretty confident that mid Cog is solid. Right, his resting win is going to be about 50 to 51%. You know, obviously he did get strictly buffed. Again, the environment changed around him, but, you know, somewhere between, you know, 0 and 1.5% win rate, like, he's going to look pretty good. And I did a quick dive. I did a quick look into item options. Obviously, the more popular purchase is Luden's Echo, but Leader's is not far behind, right? 7,400 versus 5,000 games is not a really significant pick rate difference, but the win rate difference is huge. The win rate difference is 2%. And you look at confidence intervals and we're like, actually, yeah, we're like, theoretically, again, these confidence intervals overlap. Theoretically, yes, you know, 50.9 is lower than 51.5. So, you know, if we believe random chance really skewed us one way or another, then, you know, we can't really for sure absolutely say that Luden's is stronger than Liandry's by looking at confidence intervals. Again, you could do a different test to actually say, well, what are the odds? Like, if the Luden's win rate is here, what are the odds that Liandry's win rate is down there because of whatever? And you can do some actual looks there and say, okay, what's the percentage chance that these should actually have crossed paths? But honestly, I would say I'm pretty confident. that it certainly pretty strongly suggests that you should be building Luden's Echo on Kog'Maw. If you can get to Luden's Echo on Kog'Maw, you're a really strong champion. Again, half his games on Luden's 52, half his game on Landry's at 50. So yeah, we should expect, like, as people learn to build the champion appropriately, actually, AP Cog mid should look pretty good. And I understand the idea of going Leandry's. Cooldown feels like it's a stat that should matter. You know, landing one thing for the burn kind of makes some sense. Landing an E on a squad kind of makes some sense. But nah, the flat pen for the Ludens, the flat damage to, you know, chunk the back line, like that's the play. It's better wave clear. It's the build. It's what you want to go for. And then we have Draven. And Draven is resting at 50% win rate, you know, so he's fine, more or less. Obviously, a reasonably popular champion. His pick rate didn't even go up by that much, went from 5% to 6 and change. So, you know, 30-ish%, yeah, 30-ish% more pick rate. Like that's reasonable, right? 30% more Draven games than before. Yeah, his win rate dropped despite the ult change being a strict buff, right? It is strictly better to have an ultimate that executes champions. So again, this kind of has to be the environment changing around him. Like this has to be the champions that are getting played and picked and banned and whatnot. And it has to be the types of players who are playing Draven. Because even if you look at variants, like no, we're really confident that he really is winning fewer games than before the patch. Despite him being strictly stronger. All right, so next we go to the list of champions who are officially nerfed. We're going to have this on twice, and now we don't. Okay. So, as you can see, there are some champs who got really ruined here, and some champs who didn't. But let's talk about the fact that Lilia Jungle, one of my favorite champions, is in a pretty good spot now. That turns out, I'm thought about it during the patch rundown. I talked about it. I was like, yeah, you know, even though her in-combat regen is lower, she's going to have a healthier jungle clear. She has lower cooldown on her E. She has more move speed through her passive, her Q passive. So, okay, win rate bump, and a win rate bump of, just shy of 1%. Not terribly popular, shy of 100,000 games. But yeah, between 0.5 and about 1%, she's resting at a solid win rate. Again, champion I really enjoy playing. Lilia, I think, is, again, completely pro-viable. I've liked her a lot. I think she's great, and yeah, looks like she is completely a reasonable champion to play. If you're looking to pick up Lilia, reasonable spot to do so. That said, Lilia top was definitely very frustrating, and even though she got the exact same buffs in terms of cooldown changes and move speed, and if you hit a jungle monster that regens there, her base health regen went down. Her base health regen went down by so much that it compensated for all the other nerfs of the champion, or all the buffs of the champion with a lower E cooldown, with a higher Q move speed, and it was a 1% win rate nerf. Again, popular enough that, has as many games as Zed Jungle. Just saying. Yeah, okay, we're really confident that it was a solid mid-sized nerf to the tune of about 1%, sure. But we also know that she's definitely still resting at a good spot. We know that for sure. Lilia has more success as a top laner than as a jungler in solo queue. They have not closed that gap. Next thing they could do is further lower like champion regen and have it balance out sometime later on in time. You could change some of the minion mods and things like W. As much stuff you could still do to shift it around, but hey, people clearly want to play Lilia Jungle more than top. Her pick right there is 50% higher. The win rate, is a lot closer than it was before, which is good. Because right before it was like under 50 to over 53. Like that's a 3% disparity, and we're now at like a 2% disparity, right? So, and I guess more like a bit under 2, and it was nearly almost 4. So, really good job, right? Like always a fan. This is why, by the way, designers love having tuning levers, right? Numbers that they can change that do specific things. They got to tune monster regen and base health regen, and then other things as needed to shift one down and one up in the same patch, both in directions it needed to go. So, kudos to the designer for a very well targeted and I think reasonably sized change. Obviously, could do more. Don't really have to, but Lilia top can definitely go down. She is frustrating. Her ban rate at 2.5% is not very high, but it is actually still growing, which I find kind of funny. Because yeah, Lilia top against a frustrating champion. Bans tend to lag behind. Like notice like Gangplank's ban rate, right, actually went down in this patch because it has finally caught up with the fact that people don't think he's good anymore. And so the ban rate has finally settled on something low. All right, so we have changes to Rumble, right? Trying to re-add Rumble Jungle, but letting you overheat by yourself at level 1. Gained about 0.2% win rate. That said, 20,000 games is not a ton. Rumble Jungle is not all that popular. Rumble in general is not all that popular. You can see across all his games, he still only has about 60,000 games. Sorry, about 50,000 games. Is not that many. Like Lilia in just top has more than all of Rumble. Zed in just jungle has more than all of Rumble. But we're saying, okay, well, we are pretty confident for solo queue that Rumble jungle's not in a very good spot. We're pretty confident for solo queue that Rumble top is all right. We're pretty confident in solo queue that Rumble mid is quite good. Obviously, he got buffed everywhere. It is unfortunate to see that this buff affected it seemed to maybe buff the lanes more than jungle. Keep in mind, again, we've got some pretty big variance here, right? It's between 0.2 and 0.5%, but really plus or minus 0.7% means we really can't be confident. Like, you cannot say the Rumble jungle buff was smaller than the mid and top buff. You actually just can't say that. That's not really realistic here. You can be really confident that mid, then top, then jungle are the strongest roles for solo queue for the vast majority of players, but you can't say the buff was bigger for one lane or the other. You actually need more data to really say that for sure. Next up, Qiyana mid. Now, there were some changes with Qiyana that were pretty rocky. Her EQ not tracking move blocks meant she could brick her EQ with her own ultimate. That was obviously a problem. Definitely some issues if you're like EQing in, ulting the side, whatever, like you're just going to whiff the champion, even though you should obviously be able to hit confirm that. But worth noting that obviously the jungle focus buffs did in fact buff the jungle. Did not need mid lane focus nerfs, but hey, she gained a bunch of attack speed level 1. And even though they made the EQ feel kind of weird, even though they lowered her health regen and lowered the E damage, she didn't lose much win rate mid. I guess they really thought that having a bunch more attack speed was going to matter, and indeed it seems to have. Obviously, the attack speed and the Q damage to monsters mattered a lot for buffing the jungle win rate. Qiyana was, I want to say, about a 45% win rate champion when she was a mid-jungle flex in pro play. She is not there right now. She's obviously about 48 in mid lane. She's obviously about 41 and change in the jungle. Still has a lot of room to go. Obviously, they could keep adding monster ratios to the Q and the E and whatever, and add some more damage there. But her attack speed's kind of at the upper limit of what feels reasonable. So they'd have to do a lot to get her to a good spot for solo queue players. And again, enough games that we're really confident that her resting win rate in jungle is in fact this low. It's just not good. She just isn't a successful jungler right now. Next up is Camille. Camille got a longer shield cooldown on her passive. Lost about 0.5% win rate overall. But really confident that it was a small size nerf, not that big. 0.7 to 0.2%. Resting win rate, still a bit strong. Absolutely. We know her power obviously went down. Obviously she got weaker as a laner. That there's no surprises there. But not in an absurdly strong spot. Certainly not weak. Still a completely viable champion. Okay, great. Next up, Talon got changed, right? Got lower damage on his Q, I believe, but also gained W damage to monsters. So, lost about 0.6% win rate because he doesn't kill as easily, right? Lost some Q damage in the late game, in the mid game. Okay, sure, fair enough. Still in a spot very much like Camille, right? Totally decent win rate, totally viable champion, completely reasonable champ. Yeah, sure. Totally looks good. Next up is Talon Jungle, who gained quite a lot. Obviously not going to be quite as popular. 57,000 games, not an absolute ton, but still confident the buff was between 1.5 to 2.5% win rate. Resting win rate going to be somewhere 48-49% win rate range. Like that's pretty reasonable as well. Seems like a solid jungle pick now. Getting 2% from 46 to 48 and change. Like that's actually a decent champion. Still, yeah, overall weak, but if like Talon speaks to you, it's going to be pretty good for you. It's going to be an okay pick. And if he speaks to you, you can win a lot on it. In fact, has a resting win rate now similar to Lee Sin, who finally is not overbearing. I mean, has taken nerf after nerf after nerf after nerf, like a lot of nerfs to Lee Sin jungle. So overall, on a slightly low end here, again, really popular champion. 388,000 plays, and the role is the highest of any champion here. Even more than Ashe across this patch. Win rate, again, not very large. 2 base AD doesn't affect his spells in any way at all, because spells are all based off of bonus AD. Okay, whatever. Yeah, a bit weak for the average solo queue game, but, going to be okay. We'll have a small effect of pushing him off for pro play, but isn't going to do a ton. Kalista lost another similar, small-ish, just shy of 1% win rate here. Not as popular of a champion, so the variance is pretty high. Obviously this matters because Kalista wasn't popular in the previous patch either. Her pre-patch win rate also is going to have, some fluctuations patch per patch that, she could gain or lose, maybe 0.2%, 0.3% patch over patch, somewhat reasonably so. And so, that could, right, if you're on a really unlucky swing where she was really high, kind of unnecessarily pre-patched and is swung low post-patch, this nerf could be bigger or smaller or, whatever. But, that's one thing that happens when you have kind of lowish pick rate champions, you can be confident kind of in this patch, okay, her wrestling win rate is in fact this, but you're a bit less confident that her win rate swing was this. But again, you have a lot of games like, you know, if you're saying, yeah, it was a small nerf, like, yeah, you're pretty confident it was a pretty small nerf, the early knock-up duration going down. So Varus got hit by about 0.9%. Far as we can tell, across 100,000 games, you know, really popular champion. Wrestling win rate, indeed, you know, in this 48% range. Like, we're gonna have a lot of pro play champions, you know, in the 48% range. Like, Riot doesn't really want to get below here if they can help it. Obviously, they don't want to. That's the, you know, kind of the lower end of okay. It means if they don't get seeded in pro play at all, they like immediately get buffed because of the Oracle, where it's just like the automated alarm bell, like, hey, this champion isn't good anywhere in pro or in any bucket of solo queue. Hey, buff this champ. So Varus is, you know, approaching the lower end of that for solo queue. He's here because of pro play. Again, early game focus nerfs, you know, nerfing level 1 AD, things like that. The next nerf is looking at, you know, we'll see what the next one goes, but like he's slated for the next round of nerfs because they're like, you know, we should want to nerf him by more than 1% win rate. And, you know, it's possible that it was more than 1%, you know, based on the data we have right now, but they want to go a little bit harder to make sure he's not going to take over pro play. Aphelios, is this actually accurate? Is this really his pick rate? No, okay, I typoed here. It's 48. Wait, 47. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I'm silly. There we go. So a bunch of 80 carries in a row. Yes, Aphelios is in a you know, mediocre spot, right? Another 48% winner champion, but he was one of the top 3 pro play champs as far as we could tell. Minus 1%. Okay, you know, nerfed some base AD again. They're looking at pro play focus changes. A nerf the early game. Early game is more pro play focused. You know, shift these champions around. I wouldn't mind, you know, having an automated report that just showed elo skew, and it's just like one of the other projects that Riot did was just like, hey, if we can just change base stats, be within bounds, and just, you know, toss out 10 changes a patch just to like see if we can, you know, again, don't create any new outliers, right? Don't do a Silas, but just like, hey, you know, can we get a report and just, you know, skew some champions a little bit with you know, base levels and whatnot. I don't know. I think it's a little bit of future proofing that like isn't like a huge problem, but it's also kind of low-hanging fruit, but it's also like a little bit risky. It doesn't need to be. So like there's a reason not to do it. But anyway, that's where we are. Yeah, Aphelios, again, like many of these nerfs for pro play. These pro play nerfs are champions that were not good in solo queue, but we're seeing in pro play. Or in some cases, Talon jungle who's getting buffed into the jungle. But okay, yep, Talon mid nerf because of solo queue. Rumble mid, again, just has been a good champ for a while. Totally worth playing. Let's move on to the next one. Trundle jungle has been really, really strong for a really long time. Again, we are quite confident his win rate is, in fact, well above average, even after 1% win rate nerf. That's where, you know, pretty confident with 1% win rate nerf. Yeah, even though like he's pretty good, they nerfed the rank up on his E. The most common rank up and the strongest rank up order for Trundle jungle was Qmax into Wmax. But hey, your E is 2% less slow. Which isn't a lot, but it is technically 2% less slow. But also if you're level 14, which is totally realistic for a jungler to reach, it's now even more. It's like 8% less, and then it's, you know, 12% less, and those are made up numbers, but like it becomes like, you know, your champion opponent moves like 30% faster under your slow than before, and that's like a really big change. And so yeah, a lot of Trundles will in fact get to level 14 plus. They're going to win, you know, every 100 games that have played, they lose one more than they would have because a champ got away that they would have killed, that would have meant the Baron, that would have meant the game. 1 out of 100 games, that would have happened, right? So 1 out of 100 games, that little bit of slow means you eventually don't win because that would have been a catch that would have turned into a kill, that would have turned into a shutdown, that would have turned into whatever, it would have changed the flow of the game. 1 out of 100, that's what a 1% win rate change is, right? It's actually really small to think about that way. It's amazing you can actually measure this with that many games. But is where we are. Trundle support, of course, just got absolutely ruined. Trundle support, yeah, you know what? I'm not sad about it. He can go away. Was worth noting that Trundle jungle was in fact a higher win rate champion, right? It was at, you know, 53 and change. This was at 51 and a half. But you know, they were, I think, really afraid of him taking over pro play. He got played a lot in the LPL, from my understanding. That's why they nerfed the pillar a whole bunch, because they don't want Trundle support to take over support play. And yeah, again, not terribly popular for solo queue, right? Under 20,000 games so far across the patch. Resting win rate is mediocre, but again, not horrible. Like, this is still in playable territory to me. 48 and change is not completely garbage. Definitely lost a pretty big nerf because, yeah, of course, right? It's a big deal for that champion. Next up, we have Ashe. Ashe lost 1% off of her early game volley cooldown. Okay, great. Still in a solid spot. Again, very, 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 very popular champion. Means we have very low variance on her win rate. Yep, she is 52% win rate. She is still quite good. She is still very playable. That nerf was about 1%. Speaking of about 1% nerfs, Thresh is finally below 50% win rate. I think Thresh has elo skew. I could be wrong. But I think Thresh goes up into the right with Elo, with MMR. So measuring gold plus means you're measuring a lot more towards the somewhat lower end, right? If you're measuring plat plus, you're there's like what 3 times many players in gold as plat roughly somewhere around then. So we are largely measuring gold level games, which are still above average players, but if you're going to be elitist about it or whatever, like I don't play in gold, so there's my elitism. Actually, in fact, I'm diamond in all queues, so we're got there. But anyway, the point is to say that, okay, look, Thresh is, still going to be a very, very popular champion. His ban rate has been going down slowly but surely, right? It's only down 0.7%, but really Thresh does not need to be banned anymore, really at all. Like, let your opponents pick him. He is weaker than the average champ, the average champ they could pick, right? You'd rather have them pick Thresh than pick a Soraka against you, so let them pick the Thresh. Again, popular champion, let him go for it. Cool, great. But yeah, a bit weak for solo queue, but was easily the #1 pro pick, so gone. Next up is Jace, and this one surprises me quite a bit because I really think this change was like a non-change. Like I can't fathom how this had such a big deal unless he really is getting like minion block decent amount. Like the amount of actual distance covered by this spell is so minuscule, it doesn't exist basically. But we are really, really confident this man actually lost about 1% win rate. I looked at Fizz, I looked at Jace in the top lane, but you can see Jace mid lost almost identical amount of win rate. Yeah, okay, fewer games there, but considering we're looking at plus or minus about 1%, minus 1% plus or minus 0.3, like this, 1.27 win rate nerf in mid lane, plus or minus about 0.4 or whatever. Like, yeah, like that's like we're really confident that Jace in fact lost quite a lot of power. And now he's a 46% winner champion, which is like abysmally terrible, right? Is really, 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 really weak. And again, the environment could have changed around him. You can see his pick rate went down very, very slimly. It went down 10%. So it's not like, oh, all the diehard Jace lefts and Jace is left, and that's why. I mean, maybe it's really like, well, because Gangplank got better and exclusively top laners got buffed. I mean, that's not true because Renekton got nerfed, whatever. But like, I don't really buy that. I'll be honest. Like, I don't buy that it's just environment for him. So, color me surprised, but I really thought that wasn't going to be much of a nerf, but it seems to have had a really big effect. Again, maybe it really is that like, well, actually now he can't get over his caster minions in time, so it's just not really a nerf. So, okay, it's just gone. I'll be honest, I like in reading the change list, I was like, I feel like, this isn't a change. I think rather I would say, hey, keep the ghosting, but get rid of the move speed. Because I think that's like a more interesting change. And the designer was like, well, this patch ships in about a week, and I'm not going to strip a mechanic out of a kit with 1 week's notice and very little time to react. So no, we're just going to lower the duration and stick with it. And yep, turns out that like even that very small change had a really noticeable impact. Again, maybe it's the ghosting duration is the important part, but yeah, pretty moderate, like pretty large nerf, all things considered. Yeah, don't play Jason solo queue, at least not in gold. We could look, you can again look yourself for win rate changes in higher elo, but yeah, clearly not in that great of a spot. Fizz is getting reverted into a new set of changes in the next patch because this did not land. They wanted Fizz to be stronger. And so they said, okay, you're going to block more auto attack damage. You're going to have more W damage. But you're going to have less R damage. And his pick rate went up, to be fair, right? From 3 and change to 4 and change. So a, 30-ish%, less than 30, 20, 25% pick rate increase. 25% more games, but yeah, lost a lot of power, lost a lot of win rate. Turns out the R one-shotting is the part that matters, even though Baby Shark got nerfed less than Papa Shark, Daddy Shark, Daddy Shark, even though Daddy Shark lost more than Baby Shark, doesn't matter. Like, yeah, this guy got absolutely ruined. And it's not just because like bad Fizz players are coming in, like Fizz is just not doing very well. So they're reverting and picking a different change list. That's going to be strictly buffed. There's no like, oh, it's this, but it's losing that. It's just like, nope, it's just better. And yeah, turns out that, even though Fizz was able to survive lanes a bit longer, you had to auto attack someone like 10 times to make up the R damage. You're not autoing someone 10 times, right? And that's before the AP ratio. So yep, turns out, nope, wasn't a buff. Because you would hit R sometimes, you would not auto attack 10 times. So yep. Turns out it was a nerf, and it's obvious in retrospect. I didn't see it at the time. That's because I'm human and I make mistakes. And then Renekton. Renekton is an absolute dumpster. Holy crap, did Renekton get completely destroyed by the fact that his stun duration got dropped. His win rate dropped almost identical amounts in mid lane as well as top lane. Again, Yeah, we're really confident it should be about 3%. Lo and behold, the min-mid run, yep, is about 3%. No one is surprised here. Yeah, Renekton is unplayable. The fact that he even has a ban rate. This better be teammate self-bans, because this champion is unplayable. Which means off this change list, Renekton should never be in another pro play game again. There is a set of buffs going in for Renekton. They are less pro play focused. We'll see how it ends up, but yeah, Renekton could stand to gain 5% win rates and be balanced in solo queue. I don't know how they get there without him overtaking pro play, but that's a project for a designer at some point. Probably going to be one of those mid-scope reshapes like we had with Lillia, which I thought was excellent, by the way. But like that's the kind of work Renekton needs, and that's probably going to be on the docket sometime soon. Good luck whichever designer picks it up, because it's not going to be easy. Have fun. And that's it. That's the really quick results on the patch. If you want a quick TLDR, go to the website. Just read it yourself. So that's the patch. Hopefully the things I said were interesting. I didn't go down quite as many investigations as I did in the previous one, but hopefully this was still entertaining. Let me know, again, what you want to see more of or less of in these. This is still a pretty fresh sort of idea. I think this is like my 4th video of this type. So yeah, let me know what you like, what you didn't, what you want to see, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.